Give me another concept. Another idea. Give me another concept. Another idea. Give me another concept. Another idea. Another idea.
The 80s. Crazy. 17-year-old Ben's baby.
What's up, beloveds? I hope this afternoon finds you guys in peace. There is a lot going on the internet about this whole Diddy fiasco. I originally was going to go over the paperwork, but everyone's going over the paperwork, so I don't feel any need to continue to do so. But he is in a world of trouble. But the question is, who else is in trouble? Because it's not only Diddy that was participating in this kind of stuff. Now, the other day, I was just, looking at videos, and I ran across a video about the Sharon Tate murders, Helter Skelter, Charles Manson, whatever. Now, in that story, and listening about the truth about what was really going on with that, they were having freak-offs back then in 1969 when I was born. So this was 55 years ago they were doing stuff like this, freak-offs and all this kind of stuff. And what they were saying was that Sharon Tate and the rest of them, some of them were dealing drugs, Coca-Cola, if you know what I mean, and beginning versions of Molly and ecstasy. These people were indulging in all of this. LSD, which is a hallucinogenic drug. And they're saying that those people were taken out to hide what was really going on with the freak-offs, because they were making videos, and they have videos of Hollywood industry celebrities back then that they wanted to keep a secret and they wanted to keep hidden. So there was a lot going on, guys, that I can't even really discuss on here, because I am trying to get monetized again on my channel for a change, and it's certain things I can't bring up. But if you go do some research on what really happened with Charles Manson and all of them, a lot of drugs was involved and a lot of freak-offs was involved. So Diddy is not the first one, and he might start, be the first batch of the last, because maybe finally the industry is coming down on all of this type of stuff. But here's an update from 2 hours ago from NBC News. NBC News is saying, Sean Diddy Combs arrest live updates, freak-offs at the center of sex trafficking and racketeering charges. Combs has been arrested amid a wave of lawsuits against him, alleging sexual assault and misconduct. Here's what they say to know about Combs' arrest. Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs was arrested yesterday at the Park Hyatt Hotel in New York City, a representative said. In a federal indictment unsealed today, Combs was charged with racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in, PROS, selling themselves. The charges are tied to freak-offs, coerced sex acts that Combs allegedly orchestrated and recorded. At a hearing today in Manhattan, Combs pleaded not guilty. He will remain in custody after the judge denied bail. So he has no bail, y'all. He has been denied bail. So I bet you, because they were saying that Diddy came back to New York in anticipation of being arrested. So he probably thought that this was just going to be like some type of protocol where he has to go in and he has to come back out. Because prior to him being arrested, he was seen all over the streets of New York fraternizing with people, which he never did prior to all this trouble. But I think he had, they're going to force him to make a deal and tell on other people, guys. I believe that. Combs has faced a wave of lawsuits, one as recent as last week, accusing him of sexual assault and misconduct in the past year. He has denied any wrongdoing. A solemn Sean Combs showed few facial expressions in his first appearance before a judge since his arrest on 3 federal charges connected to alleged sex abuse. Combs wore a black t-shirt, sweatpants, and Jordan sneakers to court, where at least 3 of his sons and 8 other family members came to support him. The government argued detention is warranted because of the serious charges Combs faces. The prosecution said Combs is an extreme danger to the community and is a flight risk because of his wealth. They are not playing with him. This is serious. Like, I don't think that he took it seriously. But when he went up there and they told him that he doesn't have any bail, I think that's when he saw that this is serious, because he's been getting away with things forever. A judge denied bail for Sean Diddy Combs after the music mogul pleaded not guilty to 3 federal charges connected to alleged sex abuse. Sean Diddy Combs was charged with sex trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, and selling themselves transportation. MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin, former prosecutor Kristen Gibbons Fedden, and former federal prosecutor Christy Greenberg joined Chris Jansing to provide more insight on the charges. Let's see what they had to say.
My name's Efemena. I'm in 3rd grade.
That's an ad. Let's let this ad play out and then we'll get to it. But this is really serious, guys. And knowing Diddy how he is, I doubt if he's going to keep his mouth shut about what he knows about everybody else. I feel like if he feels he's going down, he's not going to go down by himself. He's too selfish for that. Let's see what this has to say.
Joining me now is former prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst Kristen Gibbons Fedden. She famously helped prosecute the case against Bill Cosby. MSNBC legal analyst and former prosecutor Christy Greenberg prosecuted sex crimes as an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. And NBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin is with me here on set. Let's talk about the charges, and I think related to the depth of them is that we just learned the defense is proposing a $50 million bond in an attempt to get their client released.
Well, I think...
Oh my goodness, the bond is $50 million, which means they would want 10% of that. 10% of $50 million would be $5 million to get him out, which he could probably get together.
The fact that they're proposing a $50 million bond speaks to how serious the charges against Sean Combs are. So let's go through them from top to bottom. The first is a racketeering conspiracy charge. And I'm sure when some of our viewers hear that, their eyes glaze over. But essentially what that means is that Sean Combs built an enterprise consisting of his businesses, but also of personal employees and people loyal to him to help him basically accomplish these sex crimes with which he has been charged. And not only did they help him accomplish these sex crimes, they did a bunch of other criming with him, according to prosecutors, in order to cover it up or to keep his victims silent. He's also been charged, Chris, with sex trafficking under force or coercion or transportation with the intent to engage in prostitution. And critical to the allegations are the severity of the violence alleged: use of guns, forced drugging, arson, and kidnapping.
I wonder where the arson is coming from. And I wonder if they're ever going to press charges on him for what happened with Kid Cudi when his car was blown up. But let's continue.
All alleged and suffused throughout not only this indictment, but the detention letter that prosecutors sent to the judge today, where they outline in 16 pages why Sean Combs should not be released from federal custody prior to his trial. That's why you see Sean Combs and his lawyers saying, hey, we'll put up a $50 million bond package consisting of a $48 million home that I own outright and other things.
So, Kristen, I want to play some of what we heard earlier from prosecutors.
This office is determined to investigate and prosecute anyone who engages in sex trafficking, no matter how powerful or wealthy or famous you may be. No one should doubt our commitment on that. A year ago, Sean Combs stood in Times Square and was handed a key to New York City. Today, he's been indicted and will face justice in the Southern District of New York.
Now, my question is, why didn't he get a perp walk? And I don't see anything on film about him appearing in court, whereas usually they'll have these things on film, but maybe they consider this a high-profile case and they're going to keep it under wraps.
So to me, honestly, Kristen, that sounds pretty straightforward. But then I read the indictment. And the level of depravity that's just alleged there, that's described there, it's certainly nothing I've ever seen, but you have the experience. Put it into context for us.
Yeah, so what happens is, and I think one of the things that's interesting, Chris, and he was actually asked this at the press conference about, okay, if you have this indictment that outlines this depravity, how is it that just a year prior you give him the key? How is it that we didn't know that any of this was going on?
Because Eric Adams knew what was going on, and he was committing his little alleged crimes himself, because now he's under fire, and the NYPD commissioner, as I reported the other day, has resigned, and there's other people that are employed by him that are in his fold, in his camp, that are in big trouble too for hiding things that was going on. They were extorting people, so I'm not surprised that he gave him the key to the city.
And one of the things that I think is really important is that throughout the pre-detention letter that Lisa was alluding to, they talked to, I think they said they gave around 300 grand jury subpoenas, spoke to around 50 victims and witnesses who are able to really substantiate or corroborate one another with the allegations that are set forth in this indictment. So I think one of the things is, well, then how did this go on so long? But you have to remember that sexual assault, particularly when it's against someone as powerful as Puff Daddy, particularly when you have the facilitation of some type of intoxicants, you're talking about ketamine and all of those drug-fueled parties. And then,
when I hear these people talking, and they're talking about suspects, usually it's a black person, even Matthew Perry, there's a woman that's been called the queen of ketamine that's been arrested. I don't see all this publicity about her, and she may be allegedly responsible for Matthew Perry's overdosing or passing away off drugs. So when it comes down to these big moguls that are colored, they're the ones that get the brunt of it, and they're the ones that become the poster children. Let's continue.
And you go up against someone whose reputation is such that he was awarded the key to the city, you have a very large power imbalance, which further levels onto that coercion and further forces victims to be silenced. So that level of depravity, even though it's so horrific, can really cause it to be silenced when you have someone as powerful as Puff Daddy.
Yeah, Christy, to be honest with you, again, when I read through it, it was like, how did this go on for so long, again, allegedly?
The same way it was going on with Hugh Hefner, Jack Nicholson, all of these alleged people was doing the same. These people were allegedly doing the same doggone things all these years. But let's continue.
And no one spoke up, or, I mean, there have been other cases in the past related to him, but let me ask you what you, as someone who has prosecuted sex crimes at the SDNY, what stands out to you in the indictment?
So one thing I would say in prosecuting sex trafficking cases, oftentimes they are undetected for decades, like this one. I unfortunately have prosecuted sex trafficking cases that have gone on for decades. And a lot of the reasons why the victims don't say anything earlier are, even when the facts are different across cases, the ultimate reasons tend to be the same, because these traffickers know that they can instill a culture of fear.
Not only that, half of the time, it's other industry artists, and they don't want their careers to be affected or halted or get blackballed by these people in position. And they are put in position by other powerful people. Why aren't these other powerful people who allow these type of things to go on under fire as well? Let's continue.
And that culture of fear really prevents them from speaking up. Here you had force, you had violence, you had U.S. Attorney Damian Williams saying that these victims felt they could not leave because their own security was at risk if they did. And there is actual video evidence of that when one of the victims was trying to leave a hotel room, trying to leave one of those freak-offs, and what happened? Sean Combs violently beat her. That is on tape. So to the extent any juror, any member of the public questions, well, why didn't she leave? You can see the evidence of why she didn't leave sooner. It's right there on tape. I will say that in terms of looking at this indictment and looking at the detention letter that was submitted by the prosecutors here, this is among the strongest sex trafficking cases I have seen.
It definitely is, because they made sure that he was comfortable. And he thought that he was going to have another 30 to 50 years having carte blanche and being able to do these things and attack people, men and women, without any consequences.
Because you have the conduct on tape. These freak-offs are on tape, found in videos, in Sean Combs' own personal devices. You have recorded calls where he is then trying to have them and engage in a false narrative to conceal his the evidence of the crime once it was determined that the law enforcement officials were looking into this. That evidence is damning. In addition to having the victims coming forward and corroborating one another's accounts, the fact that you have video evidence they can see and hear Mr. Combs threatening and hurting victims, I mean, this case really seems incredibly strong.
Now, a lot of people are saying that Jay-Z is next, and I'm going to tell you guys why I believe Jay-Z is next. Because a lot of people have been coming out and disrespecting him, whereas 5 years ago nobody didn't want to say anything about Jay-Z. Nicki Minaj, none of them were saying anything about Jay-Z. But recently with the Super Bowl situation, whereas Kendrick Lamar was picked to perform and Lil Wayne was shunned, she came out and called him a PUSSY. And once I seen that, I said, oh, it's over for him. Jay-Z is next, y'all. Let's continue.
So given that, given the details, given the strength of the case that the prosecutors say they have, Lisa, what will the judge consider if they offer this $50 million so he can be free while this case is going to trial?
Well, as Christy and Kristen know well, the dangerousness of the individual to the community, as well as the likelihood that they will and have the capacity to flee, are two factors that a judge considers. One of the things that Sean Combs' lawyers have told the judge is acknowledging that he owns a plane. They say,
even though he owns a plane, y'all have him under surveillance, and y'all are watching his every move. So I doubt if he would be that stupid to have the police engage in a air chase running behind him, y'all. Please. But let's continue.
That there's a letter of intent to sell that plane, and as part of that, he won't take the plane right now. But where you have a defendant who owns private aviation, the capacity to flee is there. The other thing is that the dangerousness of Sean Combs should not be underscored. In addition to the allegations of literally hitting, dragging, kicking his victims. I'm reading from the detention letter now. There's an incident where he and a co-conspirator kidnapped an individual at gunpoint to facilitate breaking and entering into the residence of another. Approximately 2 weeks later, according to prosecutors, co-conspirators then set fire to that individual's vehicle, and that multiple witnesses would testify to the defendant, meaning Sean Combs, bragging about his role in destroying individual one's car.
Okay, so that's what I was wondering. Where the arson came in from. That explains that.
This is not a white-collar defendant who has committed alleged securities fraud. This is a person who is a danger to the community and a danger to women, according to the Southern District of New York, Chris.
So we have less than a minute, but let me ask you, Kristen, what happens today? What happens next?
So today the judge will most likely determine whether or not he will detain Puff Daddy or whether he will allow him to remain on the streets, as we say, with certain bail conditions intact. He's either going to put him right to jail or he's going to say, hey, you got to sell that plane. You've got to surrender your passport. There may be certain things in place, such as electronic monitoring or anything along those lines. But I think that there is a strong case for him to be detained throughout the pendency of these criminal proceedings.
So do I.
And we will have our crew write what you see on your screen, where you see on your screen outside that courthouse at 2:30 when it's all set to begin.
Okay, well, since then, since him going to court, they denied him bail. So we know that already. Let's see. A lawyer for Dawn Richard, who is suing Sean Combs, said too many victims have suffered in silence, but can now find justice in the federal prosecution of the music mogul. So, like many alleged victims, Ms. Richard suffered in silence for a long time. Richard's attorney Eric Fudali told NBC News today outside the court where Combs made his first appearance before a judge. He faces a 3-count indictment stemming from his alleged years of sexual abuse. Mr. Combs is a very powerful individual, Fudali said. It's very difficult to come out against someone like Mr. Combs, but it was seeing Cassie file her lawsuit and go public that really gave her a sense of empowerment. That it was her turn and it was her time to come forward with her allegations. Well, since Dawn Richard has come out, one of her bandmates from Danny D. Kane is saying that she's not telling the truth. So I think she may have added a few things in there because she's trying to get some money. But I'm sure she suffered through something. 3 of Combs' children arrived at the courthouse. 3 of his sons, Quincy, Christian, and Justin, arrived at federal court at about 2 p.m. Eastern Time ahead of their dad's first appearance before a judge. Federal prosecutors argued that Combs cannot be set free ahead of trial because he allegedly has a long history of tampering with witnesses. Yes, he does. That's another reason why people didn't want to talk. Because of his history of tampering with witnesses, getting people hurt. Shortly after a sex abuse lawsuit was filed against him in November 2023, Combs made multiple calls to another victim of his sexual abuse and recorded some of those calls while asking for that victim's support and friendship, prosecutors said in their letter asking to deny Combs bail. Combs in that call attempted to convince the victim that she had willingly engaged in acts constituting sexual abuse, prosecutors continued. Even more concerning, since learning about the criminal investigation, including following the execution of the search warrants at his residences, Combs contacted other witnesses on multiple occasions, including other witnesses who had received grand jury subpoenas. He's not getting out, guys. He's going to have to stay in there. No bail. Money was no object when it came to Combs' desires in highly orchestrated sex acts known as freak-offs, the government said. The defendant arranged freak-offs with the assistance of members and associates of the enterprise, including employees of his business, and the hotel rooms where they were staged often sustained significant damages. Now, these hotels knew these things was going on, but hey, money talks, BS walks. They didn't care that he was damaging their property and doing unspeakable things at their hotels as long as they was getting paid. They should suffer some type of consequences too because they allowed it and did not report it, according to a prosecution memo seeking to deny Combs bail. In one such 2012 incident held inside a Manhattan hotel, Combs had to pay more than $46,000 to cover damages to a penthouse room following a freak-off. They be high. In addition to a long list of alleged sex crimes, prosecutors accused Diddy of arson in the racketeering conspiracy charge against him. While U.S. Attorney Damian Williams declined to elaborate on specifics of the alleged arson, why are they keeping it a secret? The act might be detailed in the prosecution's request for Combs to be held without bail. Combs and a co-conspirator kidnapped a victim on December 22, 2011, from the home of someone only identified as Individual 1, according to a prosecution memo. Approximately 2 weeks later, the defendant's co-conspirators set fire to Individual 1's vehicle by slicing open the car's convertible top and dropping a Molotov cocktail. What? He dropped a Molotov cocktail in this person's car, y'all. Or had somebody do it. Prosecutors said police and fire department reports extensively document the arson and conclude that the fire was intentionally set. Multiple witnesses would also testify to the defendant bragging about his role in destroying Individual 1's car. Sean Combs offered to post a $50 million bond so he could be released from custody pending his trial on 3 federal counts which accuse him of sex crimes that go back more than a decade. He's also offered to wear a GPS monitor while limiting travel to New York City and Miami, where he'd only be attending court and seeing his doctors and lawyers, according to a proposed bail package filed by his defense team. A plane owned by Combs is in Los Angeles, and he is in the process of selling it. Federal prosecutors are asking a judge to deny bail for Combs, insisting that the defendant is a flight risk. Now, this has all the paperwork, but I don't feel like going through all this paperwork. It's too much, y'all. I don't feel like doing this. I'm sure y'all will see it elsewhere. Accused sex trafficker Sean Combs is a serious risk of flight and poses a significant risk of obstructing justice. The music mogul has a long history of seeking to bribe and illegally influence witnesses, federal prosecutors said in a 16-page letter to the court asking for Combs to be remanded into custody until trial. There are simply no conditions that would ensure that the defendant's efforts to obstruct and tamper with witnesses will stop. I believe that. He's not going to stop. He'll keep on bothering the witnesses. Prosecutors wrote to Magistrate Judge Robin Tarnowski. Prosecutors said they worry nothing could stop the defendant from acting out violently. In sum, the defendant's long history of violent conduct makes clear that even the most stringent bail conditions will not suffice to ensure the safety of the community, according to the government memo. Combs faces 15 years to life behind bars if convicted of all charges, allegedly making his flight a threat due to his $1 billion net worth. Hours and days-long sex acts known as freak-offs, allegedly produced, directed, and recorded by Combs, are at the core of this federal prosecution against the music mogul. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams mentioned freak-offs at least 5 times in his 18-minute meeting with reporters. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically, we read all that already. Federal prosecutors put on display images of weapons seized during raids on Combs' homes, including several high-capacity firearms. 2 of 3 AR-15s taken from Combs were in his bedroom closet in Miami, where they had been broken down into parts, along with magazines with ammunition loaded in them, U.S. Attorney Damian Williams said, pointing at enlarged pictures of the weapons. Serial numbers on those AR-15s have been defaced. Now, if he would have just had the guns and the serial numbers were not defaced and they were broken apart, he might not have to face any charges with that. But since the serial numbers were defaced or erased from the weapons, he's going to have to answer for that. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams rejected any hints that Combs could be in danger while behind bars while responding to a question about Jeffrey Epstein's suicide in jail. We are concerned with anyone's safety whenever they are detained prior to trial. It's part of our obligations, Williams said, but I do not draw any sort of connection between Jeffrey Epstein's suicide and what may or may not happen to another defendant while they are detained pre-trial. Our position is that pre-trial detention is warranted for Combs under the law and based on the facts of this case. Well, let me see. Grotesque and a monster, Sean Diddy Combs was charged with sex trafficking and more. Let me see what this says a little bit.
Joining us now, NBC's Chloe Melas outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal
Yeah, I just
correspondent.
heard them already. Like, I don't want to hear that again. On numerous occasions, Combs would assault women by, among other things, striking, punching, dragging, throwing objects. We saw that in the video. His criminal acts date back to 2008. 1,000 bottles of baby oil lubricants seized. Federal agents raided Combs' homes in Miami and Los Angeles in March and came away with supplies allegedly used in sexual assaults. At the time of the raids, federal officials would only say they executed law enforcement actions in New York as part of an ongoing investigation, along with teams in Los Angeles and Miami. Well, I'm not going to keep continuing to repeat the same thing over and over because that's basically what they're doing. Let's see what this says.
EasyCater is the premier tech platform for ordering.
That's an ad.
Food for your workplace from your favorite restaurants. It makes quick.
Oh, that's an ad. All they're going to do is say the same thing over and over. And they have a timeline. But you guys already know what it is. I'm not going to keep on repeating the same thing over and over, you know, in different ways, because that's basically what they're doing. I'm only reading through a news article and it's already 30 minutes. So guys, the paperwork is online if you want to check it out. It's a couple of people that even covered going over the paperwork. But as far as I can see, if them denying bail shows the severity and how serious these accusations are against Diddy. We will continue to follow it and see what's going on. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Peace and love.